Well, let's talk now to Dr. Brianna Winder-Patel, a psychologist at UC Davis Medical Center. She joins us from El Dorado Hills in California. Dr. Winder-Patel, thank you very much for being with us on the programme. Let's try and be positive about this. What are some of the coping strategies that help children who may be feeling this anxiety, and maybe parents who are themselves getting anxious precisely because they're worrying about the child maybe internalising all this tough stuff that's going on at the moment?
Sure. We teach a lot of coping strategies when we do cognitive behavioral therapy with children, and they work for adults too. They're sort of the same for all of us. One big part of anxiety is behind it, we believe, is difficulty with tolerating uncertainty. And if you think about the pandemic and all the other things in the world in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of uncertainty. And so the way that we teach them is we think about, some of the things we can control and some of the things we can't. And with things we can control, we might be able to do problem solving. You can teach very young children, 2 and 3 years old, to think about, well, I have this problem. Instead of just yelling for mom to fix it, is there a way I could think about solving it? Usually, if we solve a problem we feel like we have, our anxiety tends to go down. If we can't do problem solving, one strategy, if you're having anxiety that you don't know if it's realistic or it's excessive, meaning it's kind of too much for the current situation, is to look for proof. If you have a thought, what if my parent goes to work today and they get the virus and they get sick? We would want to encourage that child to look for proof. Do we have proof that mom is more at risk for getting this virus? Do we have proof that there are there things in place to try to help with that? And then we have other strategies, like the other mom mentioned. We teach relaxation and deep breathing, and we teach kids to really think about how to challenge the thoughts they're having and find ways to cope with them.
One strategy that a lot of people use in their lives, good or real, when they're stressful or anxious about something, is to avoid it. Presumably there is a terrible temptation with children that you don't want to talk about COVID, you don't want to talk about the possibility that grandma might get it and that maybe she'll die. Presumably avoiding it isn't going to solve the problem, particularly because you don't actually know if the child's still thinking about it when you're avoiding it.
Right. We do have a tendency to say to kids, oh, don't worry about that. That's not something you need to be concerned about. But they are in their mind. And so avoiding talking about things or avoiding facing things that make them anxious is actually what perpetuates anxiety. So if your child is bringing a worry to you and you say, oh, don't worry about it, that's not going to happen, they might think, how do you know? How can you prove that? This is something that hasn't happened yet. What would be a response that might be helpful is to say, do we have proof of this right now that this is happening? Because often anxiety is telling us there's a danger present when there isn't actually a danger present. And with kids, you have to teach them how to tell if it's kind of lying to you or it's telling you the truth. And that goes for avoidance in terms of behavior as well. When we get anxious and we avoid something, we have a brief relief in that anxiety. For example, a child who goes back to school, hasn't been there in a long time with the lockdown, and wants to talk to a new child. If they go up and they're getting ready to talk to them and they think, oh, I can't do it, and they avoid, then they feel good. They feel that relief at first, but then every time they go back to talk to a child, they're going to be in this roller coaster of anxiety, avoid, anxiety, and avoid. And something different that we teach is how to face the fears in small steps. We call this exposure and exposure therapy. So instead of avoiding, we would say, what's like one thing you can do that would be really brave and wouldn't let the anxiety make you avoid? Could you wave to that kid today instead of going up and having a full conversation? So avoidance really makes anxiety persist, whereas exposure, but it could be in very small steps over time, makes anxiety go down more completely over time.
Dr. Brianna Winder-Patel at the UC Davis Medical Center, thank you so much. It's a really valuable work, and we're grateful to you talking about us on BBC News.
Thanks for having me.
Now to